In today's episode, I am joined by the illustrator, graphic designer, and visual mastermind behind Reiner Knizia's Criminal Capers collection. That's Paul Halkyon, the artist for Soda Smugglers, Hot Lead, and Pumafiosi, 3 games that are currently on Kickstarter right now. Here and now, you will have the pleasure of learning more about Paul, as well as the Criminal Capers universe that he has created, including the characters and Easter eggs that breathe life into these games. My name is Nick Murray, and this is the Bitewing Games Podcast. Paul Halkyon is an illustrator, graphic designer, and the creative director of Uinta Alcyon. Paul desires to unite the peoples of the world. Finding ways to connect is far more valuable than finding ways to divide. He believes in the good in all people. While shadow has its place, Paul chooses to celebrate the light. His inspiration comes from diverse cultures and the natural. For him, it's especially about the people. He has a deep love of the human soul. Paul, when not working, can be found in the hills. If you see him on a trail, ask him how he broke his toe, or just keep listening in this episode because I've read this introduction to Paul enough times that I'm too curious, and I'm going to ask him today what's with this broken toe. But we'll get there in a little while. Paul, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good, Nick.
Yeah, it's good to have you here, and we have a lot of phone conversations pretty frequently, and definitely lots of emails and texts going back and forth as we communicate about Bitewing Games, because for those who don't know, Paul Halkyon has been our illustrator and graphic designer for the Criminal Capers collection, a 3 20-minute card games that are currently on Kickstarter. And so that's going to be a little bit about what we talk about today. But Paul is our guest today, and he's a very interesting person to talk to. So we're going to learn all about Paul. And so, Paul, why don't you tell us more about yourself? Those who are listening who don't know anything about you, let's hear some details.
So, well, I'm Paul, and I like to just get out and get out on adventures, and I really like to connect with people, and that's a big motivation to most of what I do. And I've got some schooling in art, and my favorite projects, unlike most of the other artists, my favorite projects were the ones where I was working with people, which works really well moving into illustration, because it's just working with people. I feel like I have something to offer, they have something to offer, and everyone involved has something to offer, and that's the way we get to something bigger than all of us. And so and I'm big into the outdoors. I really enjoy a good adventure and camping. I've got a backpacking trip that I'm going on here soon, and been excited about that and planning that, and just good fun, play hard, illustrate hard. Everything's just about doing it kind of extreme and having a blast.
Absolutely. Where are you going backpacking soon?
And connecting. Going back up to our old romping grounds, going up into Logan Canyon.
Oh, nice.
There's a nice little trail up there. It goes into some really old pine forests where they're just dark and almost like, the trees are just massive, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna do a 2-nighter. It's not super long one. It's just a 15-mile backpacking trip.
Man,
yeah.
You always make me jealous with your outdoor pictures and stuff, and the videos that you share on your social media accounts like Instagram. Because Utah's a beautiful place, and where you currently live, there's so much diversity as far as the scenery and the landscape and the national parks and the mountains, and just going out into the backyard, into the woods or the hills, and plenty to explore around there.
Oh yeah, that's a great plan.
So, and I know you draw, for those who follow your account, we see a lot of hiking and backpacking and those style of illustrations. I think those have provided a great inspiration to you. But what got you into art and graphic design in the first place?
So I've always been, I don't know, all my life, everyone was telling me I was an artist, and when that's what people tell you that you do good, you tend to just do more of that. It's nice to get the praise. It's what gets you going.
Yeah.
But honestly, I I really wanted to go in and be a scientist. I love the sciences, especially entomology, like
Oh,
insects,
cool.
and so that's what I wanted to do. And I was going to my plan was just to go out and become a photographer and go out study the rare and the undiscovered insects and do a little bit of oceanography related to the insects too that are you know uh, in the water and everything. That was my plan. When I got looking at school, I thought, man, that's a lot of
Wow.
schooling for not a very big paycheck,
Yeah.
and so I was just trying to decide, what do I want to do? Not that I need a big paycheck, and then I just turned back to the art talent. I thought, well, maybe I'll go in and teach, because as a teacher, it would give me a lot of connecting with
Mhm.
people, which is what I like. I mean, I was a shy kid as a, and maybe that's why I need to connect so much to people now, is because I spent so much time so shy.
Hmm.
And so I thought, well, maybe if I go into school, and I was so nervous about that and trying to decide everything. And that's finally where I landed, was just going into school to teach, to become a teacher. My
Wow.
goal was to teach at a university and do art, and also just explore, and then do the entomology on the side. But life just comes at you, and it changes you, and it changes your paths. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I had a professor, he gave me the best advice ever. And this advice actually changed who I was. Um, and it actually landed me where I'm at right now. But he asked me what I wanted to do, and I told him I wanted to teach. And he was an art professor, and he he told me, he said, Paul, don't get yourself set on any path. And I thought that was a little odd, because I'm like, well, he's doing what I want to do. And he's like, don't get yourself set on any path, because I was going to go in, and he told me what his plans were. I don't remember what they were. And he said he never even thought that he would ever teach, but it became one of the most rewarding, fulfilling things in his whole life.
Yeah.
And he said if he would have been set on what he was going to do, he would have missed that opportunity. So he told me, don't get set, because you'll miss the opportunities. And so that's what I did. And so I just kind of went out and chased the opportunities. And I decided, instead of being a teacher, maybe I ought to be a gallery
Mm.
artist. And so I started doing fine arts, oil painting, sculpting, and I loved using Conte crayon, which is a type of
Mm.
charcoal. And so I was going into that, and and I was in a few galleries, and I was approaching libraries, and I was doing book arts, which is a sculptural form of books. Just really getting immersed deeply into the fine art side of art. And then I was getting awards and everything. It was a lot of fun. But life, like I said, life comes at you and changes you. And so when I was doing that, I just had a little tragedy come across, and it changed my life. I went through a divorce, and because of that, I didn't quite finish the schooling, and I was just kind of lost, really lost for years. And I was just decided that all I wanted to do was play. So that's all I did, was just play, play, play. I put art to the side, and all I wanted was just to experience life.
Mm.
Because when when something really tragic happens in life, I think there's two types of people. There's those who safeguard themselves and hide, and then there's those who safeguard themselves by running. And that's what I did. And so I just ran and played, and it was a lot of fun. I got into the outdoors, and I decided not to do art. Just didn't know what I was going to do. Didn't really care. Wasn't in a bad place. Just just moving,
Yeah.
And then I from there I just was doing card games, making my own card games, and and then I had an opportunity. Someone asked if I would do some illustrations for them for their brand. They were an apparel brand, and I thought, well, sure, it would be a little job that would give me a little extra
Mm.
cash. And then that changed me again, so I went through another change, and it took me into branding for apparel, and landed my first design landed in REI,
Oh, wow.
across the
Yeah.
nation. And it moved a ton of money, a ton of retail money. I don't know exact number, but somewhere in
Oh my
300,000
gosh.
retail
Wow.
money,
That's cool.
and yeah, and because that happened, it opened doors for me. And so since then, I've just been doing branding, working mostly in apparel, and then I just decided I wanted to do more illustrations. So that's when I got onto Instagram, start pushing illustrations there, and just to see what would happen, see how people would respond. And it's a long story, but that's how I got
That's
there.
cool. Yeah, that is quite the journey, and I think that's really good counsel that your art professor gave you. Just to don't get stuck on one plan, but to be open to opportunities. I'm on a similar trajectory in the sense that I went through 4 years of undergrad. It was a business undergrad, and moved on to dental school for 4 years, and and going through that, it was like, I'm happy with settling for general dentistry, and there's a lot of variety and interesting things you can do there. And some of my classmates went on to specialize, and they're still in school or in training for their specialty now, and it just keeps going on and on. But yeah, it's been a really fulfilling and interesting journey, but I never expected to be going through dental school and then suddenly deciding like, hey, I want to start a board game publishing company, which is way, complete opposites of the spectrum from dentistry. But here I am doing both. One in the morning, one in the evening, and it is, as you say, it's very fulfilling to just be open to those things and courageous to try them and pursue them. And here we are now in the middle of a well, not during this recording, but very soon in the middle of a Kickstarter campaign for 3 Criminal Capers games from
Hmm.
Reiner Knizia. And it's crazy how our paths have brought us together. I don't think I I probably met you, like you said, when you started doing branding for attire, because I got a job at Badger Screen Printing in Logan, Utah, my hometown, and that's where I met you. And I was just like the grunt worker who was who was folding shirts and packaging them up in boxes to send them to the people, the customers who ordered them, while you were doing the really cool, fancy screen printing and kind of one of the lead printers there. So yeah, I mean, that was where I got to meet you, and that was a lot of fun getting to know you there.
Oh, those were good times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
those were good times.
totally, and I know on your end a lot of the printing was very technical, and you had to be very careful not to like overcure things or line things up incorrectly. But despite all that, you still managed to entertain me with your stories and our conversations while we were doing a lot of this manual labor. So yeah, and I
Yeah.
I ended up with I know you were doing some. I think do you still do jobs for psychological and such?
I'm still, yeah, a little bit connected with them. I don't do too much for them anymore. They've moved into a coffee shop rather than an apparel,
Oh,
so
oh,
I
okay.
don't do as much for them anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, you were, that's
yeah.
you were doing these really awesome shirt designs for them, and then you were making them at Badger Screen Printing, and I was seeing these coming down the dryer and off the belt, and I'm like, these are the coolest shirts I've ever seen. It's like there's like a bear on a unicycle. I don't know if that one was specifically psychological with a tie. There was the Godzilla.
It was,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, and then there's like Godzilla on a bike riding through the city, just spewing out gears of, like kind of like fire, but spewing out these gears. There was one with a duck, which above water it looked like it would have just been swimming, like kicking its legs, swimming around, but below water it was on a bike. And these illustrations always, I got such a big kick out of them. I still wear these shirts today, even what has it been, like 6 or 7 years since then. And yeah, I mean, I still
Oh, yeah, it's been a while.
yeah,
Yeah.
I still wear these shirts and very much appreciate them. And so your illustrations have stuck with me all these years.
Oh, I'm glad they have.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so
No, thank you. That's really kind.
yeah,
Yeah.
and even when I started designing card games and board games, I thought to myself, if I ever get a publisher to sign this, I'm going to try to talk them into Paul illustrating it, because he would be great for this theme that I was designing or whatever. But so obviously, when it came time for us to decide to get into publishing, and we were thinking up these themes, I realized like, oh, Paul is perfect for this. and I could see your art style, um, you know, kind of imagining the end product here. I could see your art style on these games, and I thought this is perfect. I don't think there's anyone else who could do this better than Paul. And sure enough, here we are with Soda Smugglers, Hot Lead, and Pumafiosi. And they were just, titles with great game designs, but just a blank slate of components, and you've really brought them to life here. And it's interesting to watch how you have done this. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the lore and the backstory behind each game in the Criminal Capers collection. And we started with Soda Smugglers. Do you remember how you approached that specific game?
So when we started with when we started with Soda Smugglers, at the time we just hadn't created much of the world yet, but we had just started into it, and we knew at first that we wanted to create these 3 games, and we had them all kind of divided, but we started to realize that they all overlapped,
Yeah, yeah,
and so once we realized that, we started to merge the worlds, and Soda Smugglers, it led the whole thing with this, you know, quirky, just fun, just, like who's upset with anyone smuggling soda, and so
yeah.
it created this wacky world to start out, and that's where we ended up. And then when we moved into the other ones, we took that wackiness, and when we had Pumafiosi, and so we're like, well, how do we combine all of that? um and so as we just developed each one, the world just got deeper and deeper. And one thing that I've enjoyed is storytelling. You know that from working
Yeah.
together. But the storytelling is just something I feel it's a good way to connect with people, and doing it visually is just incredible fun and a great way to connect with people. And that's what these worlds have created. And from Soda Smugglers giving the quirky aspects to Pumafiosi giving us, an anthropomorphic world, and then Hot Lead giving us the officers or the detectives that are kind of anti
Yeah.
Pumafiosi, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so all of this came together and created a real solid world. And it's like, I think what makes it real fun, what makes the illustrations really interesting is if I stay interested in the world and I'm digging into it and I'm having fun and trying to figure out, well, what's next? It's, even though I'm creating it, it's almost like I'm entering into the world, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
so I'm entering into it, I'm learning it. And while I do add stuff and like I don't like that, I'm going to yank that out. It does create, like you say, a lore, a backstory to something that really has no backstory, but we've put a backstory there, and that's been incredibly fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a blast. It's like Christmas every time you send me a proof or a new concept or illustration, because it's like, oh man, what is he cooking up next? And it's always been amazing to see what you've cooked up. I remember Soda Smugglers was the first game that we had you working on, and I remember approaching you and just saying, we want a colorful game, soda themed. And, if you can come up with like 5 or so soda brands, that are just fun and like kind of really, kind of pay respect to retro soda brands, but also are unique and interesting in their own way. And I was not expecting you to come up with what you did, and you just blew us away. Like, one of these sodas is called Atoll. Is it Atoll? Is that how you pronounce it? Atoll Tropic?
Atoll,
Atoll
yeah.
Tropic. And it's a,
I think that's, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's a pineapple soda, but then the soda bottle is shaped like a pineapple, and that just blew my mind. And it's shaped and colored like that, and it's like, oh my gosh, I want to drink this. This looks amazing. And then another interesting one that you came up with was Lady Cola, which like, if you look at the way this is designed, there's subtle nods to the designs of like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, which is very interesting how you were able to, both nod to that, but also with the name kind of Dr. Pepper or Lady Cola, Mr. Pibb, and sneak a
Yeah.
lady into these.
There's another
Oh, go ahead.
there's another thing with Lady Cola.
Yeah.
When I was looking it up, there's also a Star Trek character by the name of Lady
Right.
Cola. And so if you look on the bottle, there's a little hint towards a Star Trek emblem on there. Just little Easter egg on there. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
A lot
yeah,
of
all
fun to
these
create
subtle
those.
nods and like the I don't think it took me, I don't think I figured it out initially, but when you did a Granny's bath bubble soda, I was just like, why is it Granny's bath bubble? And then I realized, oh, it's a Granny apple. You got me. Okay. And just like it's just so fun to look at all these soda bottles, and they are front and center on the cards in Soda Smugglers. And then we took that a step further and made the point tokens into bottle caps, which turned out amazing as well. Yeah, and they're so fun to play with. And have you seen the pictures that I've sent you pictures of the final bottle caps, right?
Yeah, yeah, I saw how they work together and everything. I'm super excited to play on that when we get to that stage. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to exercise restraints when we're deciding like component sizes and things like that, because on one hand it'd be a little cheaper for us to make these components smaller, the punch board tokens smaller, um, and then there's less punch boards in the game, and so that's nice from a cost perspective. But every time you give us art, I'm like, we need to show this off, and this needs to like, you know, you have earned a nice big token here. And so like those bottle cap tokens are like literally the dimensions of a real bottle cap. They're pretty large, and they're so satisfying to handle. And we also have the deluxe version, the plastic bottle cap tokens with your designs going to be printed on those as well. So yeah, Soda Smugglers. I've told Paul this, but we need to get into the soda crafting business after we get Bitewing Games up and running, because we've really
Oh, definitely.
yeah, you've come up with some amazing brands. I'll be honest.
I definitely want to try that Atoll Tropic, but I might pass on the granny bath bubbles.
I don't know, the Puma on the box cover smuggling it, so it's got to be good, right?
It's got to be good.
Oh man. Well, yeah. Well, speaking of the Pumafiosi, it was interesting the first thing you approached with that as well, because it's a card game first and foremost, with a deck of cards that go from 1 to 55, as well as 9 hierarchy cards. So those are like the main components of the game. But the secondary component are these family tiles, and if you win with one of your cards and you decide to put it on the hierarchy, then you got to put your family tile on it too, and to designate that that was your winning card, and you're going to be attached to that for the rest of the game, for better or worse. And but I thought it was so cool how the first thing you approached with Pumafiosi was the family emblems.
I think the emblems were just the deepest place to go to develop the world, because if we started developing the characters, then we're developing from the end of the story, and so to tell the story, I think we needed to develop who the family was that these characters are coming from, and so that's why I went straight for that, because it would create a deep lore and expand on the world that we had already started by starting Soda Smugglers. And and then we kind of knew a little bit about the crime families who ran everything, and I'm sure they have their hand in the soda business too, and so that's why I approached that. And also, it was the best way to create an illusion of a culture within the game. The family tiles gives me an option to develop backstories, and like we have the Knuckle Brothers,
This is so cool.
and so it kind of gives a hint that they're like going to beat people up, rather
Yeah.
than pulling out a knife or a gun. They just want to bruise people. They're the bruising side of the Promofi or of the Promafia.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just gave me a lot of room to develop the world first.
Yeah, that was a brilliant way to approach it, because as you said, the Knuckler brothers, they have, you'll see this in the game, they have these brass knuckles with like three heads on the knuckles, being the brothers, with these really cool kind of almost like Spartan helmets, would you say? Or how would you describe the way you design those?
Yeah, I was thinking. So actually, here's a fun little Easter egg in there. Those the three heads on there is a direct copy off of my mother's family crest. She
Wow.
her crest has three. three helmets like that on it, and
Wow.
it's supposed to be the helmets of three brothers, and so that's where that is. It's a nod to my mom's family crest.
So you are part of the bloodline of the Knuckler brothers, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that one's my favorite one.
Yeah, you did
Not
a
that I'm going
killer.
to beat anyone up, but
You did a killer job with those, and I love how you even integrated it into the Pumafia boss's chair, the back of his chair. It's just like this is the coolest chair
yeah.
ever, you know. So again, we got to go get into the soda business and probably the furniture business thereafter, because I would buy that furniture for sure. um, yeah, and part another huge part of the Pumafiosi and the greater Criminal Capers universe is the boss knife and the boss rose. These are things that show up either front and center or subtly in the background across all three games. And so you have given me the rundown on the story behind the boss knife and the boss rose and the way you design those and why they're designed the way they are and what's the story behind them. And you got to share this with everybody else because it blew my mind how much lore there was behind this rose and a knife that look really cool. But then when you hear more about it, it's like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah. So the boss knife was the first thing that I came up with, and it's just this knife. I kind of was like, I wanted some sort of a kind of a logo, you could say, that would represent the boss. So just I could sneak it in anywhere. It gave me Easter egg ability to sneak it in places
Mm-hmm.
and it going up. If you look on the illustrations as they come out, there's going to be some of them have the boss knife on a belt buckle or stuff like that, so it's in there. And then the boss rose was kind of a secondary because I felt like the knife wasn't unique enough. So I threw the boss rose on the boss knife.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, the boss rose developed into its own emblem to be used. And the boss rose is a little different than the regular rose. It's a single rose with a very large thorn,
Mm-hmm.
and that thorn, what I figured in that world is that thorn represents the boss, and when someone's trying to climb within the Pum Mafia, they're trying to climb up and up the ladder, get higher up, get closer to the boss.
Yeah.
If the boss likes them, he gives them the rose. If he doesn't like them, he gives them a rose. And so if you get a rose from the boss, it means two things. One is you're either being promoted, or the other is you're going to disappear and you have just a moment to go tell your family goodbye. And within the world, I was thinking that the person receiving it would know which side of the rose they're getting, if they're getting
Right.
the thorn or if they're getting the flower head, and so they just know immediately whether they're climbing or whether they're disappearing. And so it was just fun, and that's not part of the mechanics of the game or anything. That was just fun to develop, and like as we developed it, we liked it, and we decided to push it. Which I'm glad that Nick, I'm glad you liked that because it's really given me a lot of range to push it into other little Easter egg areas for people who are dedicated to the illustrations to find.
Yeah, yeah, and you said it's not mechanical, but actually, coincidentally, it works very well because in Pumafiosi, every player gets we call them right now a wealth point card and a penalty point card, and because when you are winning and placing these cards on the hierarchy, you're gonna wherever they end up, you're gonna get usually wealth point cards, positive points, wealth points, positive points. And if you get bumped down the hierarchy at any points, then you take penalty points. And so it's the same token, and whichever card it's on determines whether it's basically positive or negative points. But basically, it's exactly what you're saying. If they're on the wealth point card, it's a good thing. And if they're on the
Yeah.
penalty point card, then that is a bad thing, and you're going to lose some points at the end of that particular game. And at the bottom of the hierarchy, there's right now we have the chalk drawing the outline of a deceased Poo Mafia member, and yeah, they take negative those penalty points as well. So I felt like it fit in like a glove coincidentally, and that's something Reiner Knizia designed, and yet you've made coming from it at a different angle, you've made something that fits it very well.
Yeah. Well, as an illustrator, I feel like that's my job is, because going into it, um, I have the people who are going to play it are one factor, and then the mechanics from the game, that's another factor, and then just visual storytelling, that's another factor. And it's just my job as an illustrator to merge everything
Mm,
in a way that not only just tells a story, but creates kind of a dance, a play,
mm,
something playful, so it just captures the players into the world a little bit deeper. And
mm.
that's the advantage of being an illustrator, is I can take things that are already developed into that new level and just connect everything. And that's what it was. That's what that boss rose ended up being. It was just a great way to connect everything, the mechanics, the players, and then also to get Bitewing connected, because now that's kind of becoming a little icon that's across all three games,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you've done an excellent job with it. And as a gamer, now I have almost 200 games in my collection, and I've played many more than that as well. And I've been impressed by games and productions that do put a lot of heart and thought and effort into the art style. I think Leader Games is a really good example of this. And there are others out there, a lot of really good artists. I recently did a podcast and blog post about them. But to me, that players, they enjoy games in different ways, and everybody has different personalities. Some are there for the mechanics and the crunchy decisions. Others are there for the theme and the narrative that emerges from play. Some are there for the interaction that they get to have with their friends. And then some, their highlight of a particular game could be the art. They maybe they're not much of a gamer themselves, but when a friend talks them, or a family member talks them into playing, and suddenly they're holding these cards that look gorgeous, they're looking at this board or this box that's just like, wow, this is really cool. And that there's much to explore there, hopefully, if a lot of thought has been put into it. And so that's been something very important to me. And starting Bitewing Games as something that we want to put into each of our games is very thoughtful and interesting and entertaining illustrations. You can, because that's all part of the overall experience and package. And we haven't talked about Hot
Mhm.
Lead yet. Is there anything in particular you want to share? That's the last one that you started working on. Well, actually, Pumafiosi, you kind of jumped over to Hot Lead and circled back to Pumafiosi, and now you're circling back to finishing up Hot Lead. But it doesn't matter. What's I guess influenced your design work in Hot Lead in particular?
Um, I think on Hot Lead, it was just a lot of fun to jump in, because it was the complete opposite of what the crime family of the Pumas was. It was
Yeah.
nice to jump into that. I felt like it was a good counterbalance to what we were developing.
Mm,
And so as I did that, it really um helped prepare me for Pumafia, or Pumafiosi. It helped me prepare for that in a way that was by doing the opposite of what it was, if that makes
mm,
any sense.
yeah.
It just and so and then that's also where we really get to take off and just do all sorts of different animals over there. And it's really fun, because at that point, the silhouettes of the illustrations and everything are just so extreme, because I can do, like, we've got an elephant as one of the lead characters, and
Yeah.
that's just really fun, because he's so different from a cat.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I love the way you've illustrated this super tall, bulky, buff, really, I guess, what's the word? Uh, Impressive elephant, somebody intimidating is the word I'm looking for, based on his size. But then he has this tiny little gun in his hand, and this tiny little hat hanging off the corner of his head, and like it all comes together just in such a fun, very Paul way. And I really appreciate those subtle touches that you put in there.
One thing that's been fun about the three games is I'm approaching each one in a slightly different, like, illustration style, even though I'm still trying to put my signature on it. The cross hatching is really something that a lot of people, my fans, seem to like, is
Mm,
is that. And so I'm putting that all into every single one of them, but I'm approaching it technically a little different on each one. So each game should feel a little different, on the table from when one person plays or a person plays one game to when they play another game. And that's something that's been a lot of fun too, is to try to make them so they all fit together, but they're all also super divided too.
Yeah, I think you've done a really good job with that. We have prototypes of some of your latest artwork that we've been testing, the visual design of and showing to people around here. And yeah, I agree. And even we've been taking some of the art assets and graphic design assets you've given us to make the Kickstarter page. And it's been interesting to try to, like, when I've tried to put together, a Pumafia character and a hot lead character, how when they're right next to each other, it's like, oh, these were done in very different ways. And they look, they look cool in their own unique way. But as you say, they have distinct flavors within the same universe. And
Mhm.
I guess, you said the Knuckler brothers are probably your favorite Pumafia family. Is Atal Tropic? Is that your favorite soda that you designed of the bunch, or?
Um, it's actually the what's it called?
Oh,
The snake ginger. I forget the name of it now.
snake oil ginger, right?
Yeah, the ginger ale with
Yep.
yeah, the snake oil ginger. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's my favorite one.
That
But
is a
I'm a
good one.
huge ginger ale fan,
Oh, cool.
and also I like the idea of snake oil. It's like the old medicines that was sell that people used to go around and sell that would cure everything, or they'd claim it would cure everything.
Right.
And so it's just two of my favorite things coming together in a very odd way.
That is cool. Yeah, I like
Not
I
that I
like
believe in snake oils, but just yeah.
Sure. I like the design of that bottle too. It's got a rustic feel to it, and I think you nailed that. Yeah, how about the Pooh Mafia characters and the hot lead characters of the ones you've illustrated so far? What's been your favorite Pooh Mafiosi illustration and your favorite hot lead illustration?
Um, my favorite Pumafia illustration is it's the I call her the singer or
Yes.
Jessie. She's my favorite. She's that she's the Puma that's got the rocket launcher,
And the bright red
she's in a
dress.
red dress, and it
Mhm.
looks like she just walked right out of the club and she's about ready to blow up some tank or something, and
She
she's
brought down the
just
house, and then she's gonna bring down the house.
yeah, exactly. So she's my favorite,
Yeah.
and but I mean, you know, I don't know. I find that when I first draw some, I get really insecure about them.
Mm,
And then as people respond really well to them,
mm,
then they start to become my favorites. So the
mm.
paper bag guy is actually probably one of my favorites. He's dressed so sharp and he's got this paper bag on his head because he's trying to hide his identity,
Yeah.
and he's just looking like he's really caught, like he's in trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he's becoming one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
He'll probably outdo the rocket launcher gal eventually.
Oh man. Yeah, the first time you sent me the sketch for the paper bag guy, I just laughed out loud. I was like, this is amazing. And yeah, I've enjoyed putting him on some of our advertisements and stuff. And yeah, the one lady, I've referred to her just in our emails as Lady Lethal. Because
Lady Lethal,
yeah,
yeah.
because you've got Lady Cola in Soda Smugglers, you got Lady Lethal and Pumafiosi, and then you got the lead lady llama detective and hot lead. So you got three ladies across the board, and plenty more, obviously. But yeah, those are very good illustrations. How about hot lead? You got any favorites you've done there so far?
um I think the elephant, like, I
Yeah.
don't mean to be repetitive on him, but what I really liked about him was he was the first one that came out that has really set the style for that whole game.
Mm,
And I did, just like I do with any illustration, I do research before I get jumping in.
mm,
And so I was researching around detectives and looking at just what was out there as far as the images, and I wanted to create something stereotypical, and and I wanted something that looked a little Perry Mason, but not,
mm.
somewhere between Dick Tracy and Perry Mason is kind of what I was aiming for.
Yeah.
And and I feel like he landed neither of those. And that's what I liked about him.
Oh,
He
nice.
was inspired by them, but he is just his own character, completely his own.
Yeah.
And he just set the mood. And from there, I think every other character will kind of orbit or follow what his lead is. So that's why he's my favorite.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
um, yeah, no, yeah, he's on the box cover, and he's definitely one of my favorites as well. And for those who have seen our Kickstarter page and all the gorgeous illustrations and cards on there, um, yeah, there are still more hot lead illustrations to come. Those are some of the final characters that are going to be finished up over the coming weeks. And but we've given you plenty of illustrations and components to explore to know what to expect from Paul here. And so you'll have, if you are have pledged already, or if you're thinking about pledging, we'll be sharing those, teasing out those illustrations as they come to us from Paul. So that'll be something to look forward to. As far as the whole project, what would you say were some of the hardest parts of the entire project from the, any of these three games?
I would say the scope of it. We've got 3 games, and that means that there is a massive amount of files, and
Yeah.
so balancing it all. One thing that people don't know about artists, they think that they just draw, but I'm actually organizing and planning, and there's so much that goes in before I illustrate, and so I think just managing those files has been one of the most challenging thing, because each illustration has its own file, each card face has its own file, each card back has its own file, and it gets really, really intense. The other thing was coloring everything. That's always, color theory is one of the hardest things of design,
Mm.
trying to get colors that work together. And I'm never satisfied completely with anything I've done in color, but I took classes and really studied color theory pretty deeply. So I know what's going out is good and competitive with what's in the market, but I myself will never be totally satisfied with the colors. So those are the toughest, I'd say the most challenging elements of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. I remember you also mentioned you kind of hit a wall with the Pumafiosi illustrations early on. You were trying to come up with characters and illustrations to put on these cards, but then you kind of had somewhat of a breakthrough. Would you say?
Yeah, I had a good breakthrough, and that was what I realized that I was doing is I was trying to create a finished product.
Mm,
And even though that's the goal, when that happens, I need to back off. When I'm beginning to just get caught up trying to figure out how to get everything connected, I need to back up and just do sketches and not do finished things and just get really playful.
mm,
And I'll do sometimes 1, 2, 3 sketches that are just playing, trying to loosen up my mind so I can get back into it. And that's where I was, as I just didn't know exactly how to present everything, and I was like trying to debate: do I keep the tails on the pumas, or do I not do the tails? You know what I mean?
yeah.
And so all of this was coming down, and I realized I was just getting too strict on myself, and I needed to just play
Mm.
and start goofing off, and that's what I did, and that's why I decided to ditch the tails, because they don't need them, and then just to work on the silhouettes of the cartoons
Mm.
within the game, because the silhouettes is what's going to be most interesting, and then just make sure each silhouette is different from the other illustrations in the game. That way it just stays interesting, if that
Yeah.
makes any sense. I know that was a kind of a roundabout way of answering, but
No, yeah, there's
yeah.
a lot of different shapes and sizes and proportions of illustrations and characters in the game, and it does give it a lot of character, and very interesting to flip through the cards and see all the differences. As far as you mentioned that you've done some card game illustration in the past. You actually sent me one of them, Monster, which is a very cool looking game with monsters trying to eat children, and some of the most interesting monsters I've ever seen illustrated. And that I got a couple of years before Bitewing Games, and that was really probably one of the major things that was like, oh, Paul he can do game art, and not just attire. And so even though you're kind of newer to the industry of board games and card games, what were your goals and intentions coming in with this whole project, and I guess your contributions to this industry?
So I wanted to enter into the industry, because I'm a fresh artist moving in, and I have some styles that are kind of unique to me. I do work in various styles, some that are, like for different brands, I do different styles. But with this project, it's been really fun because I'm doing it in my style,
Hmm.
and so I wanted to enter the industry, bring something fresh, something that hasn't exactly been seen. That's one thing when I was in school that I enjoyed, uh, taking what everyone else was doing and then do it just a little different, but not so different that people couldn't connect with it,
Hmm.
but different enough that they wanted to connect with it because they
Hmm.
didn't see it often. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's what I'm hoping to do with this, is to enter in a way that people are kind of like, oh, this is a new style. Like I haven't seen this in the. And even though there's some very common themes like the anthropomorphic animals, with this, like what it doesn't. I mean, what I'm bringing into it is the unique mark making that is unique to me. The cross hatching, um, the messy lines instead of these really flowy lines,
Hmm.
weighted lines. I'm doing these messy lines because everyone else is doing the flowy lines. I want to do something that catches an eye, something that stands out. And so
Sure.
that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I hope to bring to history.
Yeah. Well, I think I've been a fan of your Instagram page. It's anytime you post, a new illustration or whatever on there, I've always enjoyed it and stopped to look at it. Whereas usually I'm just scrolling over stuff, and I think you're going to make a lot of fans, new fans, out of these games when they get to see, not only the big upfront illustrations and these characters, but also the tiny details on the card backs. Yeah, and you almost have to hold them close to see how much character and lore you've packed into some of these games. And so, yeah, we really appreciate what you've done, and we do have really big plans. We're planning a lot of our later productions around your art style and around your strengths and a lot of the really cool things we've seen from you in the past. And so it'll be something to look forward to from future Bitewing Games and Paul Halcyon collaborations. But yeah, I think people have gotten a really good impression of your art and where you're coming from with it in this podcast. But I have to ask you before I forget, Paul, how did you break your toe?
Oh, so so that's the question that I put out there because it's fun to connect over, and I hope that no one actually asks me. So it's embarrassing. I hung a hammock between two trees, and hung it a lot higher than I should have. It was about 7 feet up,
Nice.
and so I had to jump up to grab the hammock, and I was pulling myself into the hammock, and I was spinning around to get on top of the hammock, and I just kept spinning, and the hammock spit me out, and I fell to 7 feet. It was just 7 feet, but I fell and I landed on my toe in such a way that it broke my toe.
Oh,
So
no.
it was really embarrassing because I had a really big audience and they all
Oh.
watched me fall out of that hammock, and
they're,
everyone's like, "You okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay. Of course I'm okay." but
they're like, why didn't
but
you just
my
hang
toe
it
hurt.
lower? Oh man,
Yeah.
it's so fun to be up
So
high in a
it's
hammock
really
though.
embarrassing.
Yeah.
It is. It is a blast. Yeah.
You do a lot of that. I know. I've seen you some of your selfies and stuff hammocking out in the wilderness, and that's like, pure relaxation right there. I don't know if it gets any better than that.
Yeah. Well, when I do the backpacking trip here that I've got planned, I'm going to be taking hammocks because they're just so light. The backpacking hammocks are so light
Yeah.
and reduce the sleeping gear needs significantly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I do a lot of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, do you have anything else you want to share about this project, or any I guess Easter eggs or things that you want people to keep an eye out for as these games, go on to be published?
Yeah. The first thing I'd like to share is just how amazing you, Nick, and Kyle, and Games have been to work with, because what's been wonderful about it is you've recognized, that as an illustrator, I'm also a storyteller.
Mm.
The the images are really a visual language, and
Mhm.
so you've given me a lot of room to develop things like the boss rows, and also to incorporate that within the mechanics,
Hmm.
So you've given me the room that I wish that every client would know to give me, you know what I mean? And it just allows me to be fully creative and work with where you're leading me and where you want me to go. So Bitewing Games has absolutely been amazing to work with, and you've been very professional about everything, which I really appreciate. um as far as Easter eggs, uh there's there's Easter eggs all over it. You know, you'll find the boss roast showing up in different places. You'll find the Soda Smuggler. He pops up in a couple of the games,
Yeah.
like the guy that's on the box cover of the Soda Smugglers.
Yep.
You know, and so uh, there's lots of Easter eggs. I would recommend people go and dig deep and try to find them
Hmm.
if they're into finding the Easter eggs.
Yeah.
They're all over it. There's yeah, it's just been a lot of fun. So that's my 2 bits on the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your kind words. We, as I said, it's been a pleasure to work with you up to this point. You continue to surprise and delight us with your concepts and illustrations and the lore that you create, and the character and life you breathe into these worlds. And as I said, we do have big plans next year. Currently, we're looking at 4 games to publish next year through Kickstarter. Not just one campaign though; it'll at least be 2, um, and all done with Paul. Granted, he has enough time, and we don't kill him off with all the work we've given him so far, and so a lot to look forward to, both with these games and beyond. And so, for those of you who do appreciate art and graphic design, and especially good art in games, please do support this Kickstarter campaign, which is live right now. It's called Reiner Knizia's Criminal Capers Collection. And for your information, it doesn't only support Kyle and I to continue to be able to publish games, but it supports Paul directly as well, because we feel, he's just as and Reiner obviously, and because they are just as much, pillars to this creation as us, just trying to manage the project and make it successful and make it the best it can possibly be. So thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed getting to know Paul better, and you can just look at his illustrations and games and learn a whole lot about Paul, and a lot of really fun and interesting things. But it's fun to hear you and have this conversations with you and just hear your thoughts as well. But Paul, where can these listeners find you, and if they want to follow your work, both in Bitewing Games and the many projects you do outside of it, and the fun little doodles that you do here and there, where can they find you?
So my main account would be Instagram. It's Paul underscore Halcyon, and there's a little K in there that makes the S sound. So make sure to look for that, or to spell that correctly. But yeah, I have an Instagram, I have a Twitter, and I have a TikTok. My Twitter and TikTok are new, and aren't really doing anything much. So if you want to jump over there and let me know and say hi wherever you come find me, make sure to send me a message, say hi. I love people, and I love aspiring artists, especially. I feel like everyone's got a story to tell me, and I want to hear your story.
Yeah, Paul's a very generous and kind and thoughtful and fun person to talk to, and so he's very approachable. Like he said, if you do have a personal interest in art or graphic design, you're dabbling in it, or you want to dive deep, whatever it is, Paul is definitely there to chat, and he's a great mentor and very wise, not just in the art world, but in many things. And as you've heard, he's a he's had a lot of experiences that have made him into the amazing person he is today. So Paul, we are grateful for the time you've given us today. I know you have so many. I know I sometimes send you emails and barrage you with things that we need done, as if you know we're your only client, but you have many clients out there that you've got to keep happy. And so thank you for taking the time to do this today.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for yeah, sending these worlds to me to create. Appreciate you.
Yeah, the first of many. This concludes another episode of the Bitewing Games podcast. Another special thanks to Paul Halcyon. That's spelled Halkyon. if you want to look him up online. And if you'd like to pledge your support for the Criminal Capers collection and secure yourself copies of these games, then you have until Thursday, September 2nd to make your pledge before the campaign closes. For those of you who have already pledged, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for supporting this Kickstarter project. And please, if you have any family, friends, acquaintances, strangers, whatever it may be, that even seem like they may enjoy these card games, then please share our page with them. The more people who support this project, the better we can produce these games. And the more resources we'll be able to put into future projects as well. Also, one more quick order of business before we wrap up. We are soon planning to do a Q&A podcast episode, meaning we need your questions for us to record some answers. You can submit your questions to us through many different routes. You can email your questions to nick@bitewinggames.com, or you can just go to bitewinggames.com, click on the contact page, and submit your questions that way. What kind of questions can you ask? Any questions. It can be about publishing, it can be about the latest games that we're playing, it can be about dentistry, whatever the heck you want. Until next week, my name is Nick Murray, and this is the Bitewing Games Podcast.